The plan was simple. 3 days, no responsibilities, no thinking about the future, no talking about feelings. Just me and my best friend, a rented cabin, a lake, and a lot of beer. That's what I told myself when Isaac texted me. We should get out of the city for a bit. Just relax. You in? At the time, I didn't realize that trip would completely mess with everything I thought I understood about him and about us. Isaac and I had been friends for almost 4 years. We met during our first year of college. Same economics class, same terrible professor, same habit of sitting in the back and complaining under our breath. It started with shared notes, then coffee after lectures, then late-night gaming sessions. Somewhere along the way, he became my person. Isaac was the kind of guy everyone liked without really trying. Tall, broad shoulders, messy dark hair that always looked intentional even when it wasn't. He had this calm confidence about him, like nothing ever really shook him. Meanwhile, I was Parker, average height, sarcastic, anxious about everything, and very good at pretending I didn't overthink things. There was just one complication. I'd been into him for about 2 years, and he was straight, at least as far as I knew. So when he suggested a weekend getaway, I didn't read into it. I couldn't afford to. Just a break, he said when we loaded his car Friday morning. No stress. No thinking about jobs or grad school or any of that crap. I laughed. You realize you're the one who's been spiraling about your future for 3 weeks, right? Exactly, he said, tossing a bag into the trunk. I need this. The drive was about 3 hours. He played music, sang badly to half the songs, and kept one hand loose on the steering wheel like he always did. At one point, he glanced over at me. You're quiet. I'm always quiet. You're thinking quiet. I smirked. I'm wondering if this cabin is going to be one of those horror movie places where we die. He grinned. If we die, at least we die relaxed. That was Isaac. Everything was a joke until it wasn't. The cabin was smaller than I expected. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, tiny kitchen, big window facing the lake, and 1 bed. I stood in the doorway, staring. Isaac walked in behind me and immediately dropped his bag. This is perfect. I didn't move. Isaac, yeah, there's 1 bed. He looked at it, then back at me. Oh, a pause. Then he shrugged. We've crashed on worse. Technically, he wasn't wrong. We'd passed out on couches, floors, and once in his car after a concert. But this felt different. It's fine, I said quickly. I'll take the couch. He glanced at the living area. The couch was barely big enough for a child. You'll wake up crippled. I'll survive. Isaac watched me for a second, then shook his head. Or, he said casually, we share like normal people and don't make it weird. My heart did something stupid and fast. I'm not making it weird, I said. Good, he replied. Then it settled. And just like that, it was decided. The first day actually went exactly how we'd planned. We swam in the lake, ordered terrible pizza from the nearest town, sat on the small wooden deck with beers while the sun went down. It was easy, comfortable, familiar, the way things always were with him. Around sunset, he leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms over his head. His shirt lifted slightly, exposing a strip of skin. I looked away immediately. You good? He asked. Yeah. You're quiet again. I'm watching the water. You hate water. I like this water. He laughed, and the sound did that thing to my chest it always did. For a while, we just sat there. Then he said, more quietly, I'm glad you came. I glanced at him. You invited me. Yeah, he said, but you didn't have to say yes. There was something in his tone I couldn't quite place. I wanted to, I said. He held my gaze for a second longer than usual. Then he nodded and took another drink. That night was when things started to feel different. We were inside, lights low, some random movie playing that neither of us was really watching. Isaac was sitting close, not touching, but close enough that our shoulders brushed whenever he shifted. At some point, he didn't move away. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Friends sit close. Friends share space. Friends don't notice how warm someone's arm feels against theirs. Halfway through the movie, he stretched his legs out across the couch. His knee pressed against mine. He didn't move it. I didn't either. The contact stayed there. Small, casual, but neither of us acknowledged it. Later, when we were getting ready for bed, the reality of the 1 bed situation hit again. Isaac tossed his shirt onto a chair and climbed under the covers like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stood there for a second. You coming? He asked. Yeah. I turned off the light and got in on the other side, keeping as much distance as possible. The mattress dipped slightly toward the middle. We lay there in the dark, a few inches apart. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Isaac shifted onto his side, facing me. "You're still being careful," he said quietly. "I'm not. You are." I swallowed. "It's a small bed." Another pause. Then he moved a little closer. Not touching, just closer. "Relax, Parker," he said softly. "It's just me." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they made my heart start pounding, because the way he said it didn't feel casual at all. And a few seconds later, when his leg brushed lightly against mine under the blanket, he didn't move it away. Neither did I. And that was the moment I realized something about this trip. We hadn't come here just to relax. At least, not for the reasons I thought. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because anything obvious happened, but because everything felt like it could. Isaac's leg stayed pressed against mine under the blanket. Not heavy, not demanding, just there. Warm, solid, real. Every time he shifted, our knees brushed again. Every time, my body reacted before my brain could catch up. "Stop overthinking," I told myself. He was probably asleep. Except he wasn't. After what felt like an hour of staring into the dark, I heard him exhale. "You awake?" My stomach tightened. "Yeah." A quiet pause. "This bed really is small," he said. I almost laughed. "You're the one who insisted." True. He shifted again, closer this time. Our thighs were fully touching now. My pulse started hammering so hard I was sure he could feel it through the mattress. "Parker," he said softly. "Yeah. You ever feel like you're stuck?" That wasn't what I expected. "Stuck how?" "Like everyone else is moving forward." He continued, voice low, thoughtful. "And you're just pretending you know where you're going." The tension in my chest shifted. This was familiar territory. Safe territory. "Every day," I admitted. He gave a quiet huff of a laugh. "Yeah." Silence settled between us again. But it felt heavier now. More charged. Then, without warning, his hand brushed against mine on the mattress between us. It could have been accidental. Except he didn't pull it away. Our fingers were barely touching. The smallest point of contact. But it felt like a live wire. I stopped breathing. He didn't move. Neither did I. Seconds stretched. Then his fingers shifted slightly, hooking just a little against mine. Testing. Waiting. I could have pulled away. I should have pulled away. Instead, I let my fingers curl back. Just enough. It wasn't full hand-holding. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, but it was intentional. Isaac inhaled slowly. "You're not moving," he said quietly. "Neither are you." Another pause. Then, almost like he needed to hear it out loud. "This is fine, right?" My heart was in my throat. "Yeah," I said. My voice barely worked. "It's fine." That word, fine, carried about 1,000 unspoken things. His thumb brushed lightly over my knuckles. Not by accident. Slow. Deliberate. And that's when I knew something had shifted. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't sleepiness. This was him choosing not to let go. We didn't talk about it. Not right then. After a few more quiet seconds, he squeezed my hand once, lightly, then slowly let it go. Like he was giving me an out. Like he was seeing how far I'd follow. He rolled onto his back again. Our legs were still touching. The air between us felt thick. "You ever think," he said after a minute, "that maybe we don't know ourselves as well as we think?" My throat felt dry. "Probably." "I mean," he exhaled, "people assume stuff about you. About me. And you just kind of go with it." I turned slightly toward him in the dark. "Isaac." "Yeah." "What are you saying?" For a long time, he didn't answer. Then, "I don't know." But the way he said it, he definitely knew. The next morning was weird. Not awkward exactly. Just hyper-aware. We both acted normal. Too normal. We made coffee. Teased each other about who slept worse. Argued about what to have for breakfast. But every time our hands brushed grabbing mugs or plates, it felt loaded. Every glance lasted half a second too long. At one point, I caught him looking at me across the kitchen. Not in the usual distracted way. In a focused way. Like he was studying me. When our eyes met, he didn't look away immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly. "You're thinking again," he said. "You started it." He smiled. But it wasn't his usual easy grin. It was smaller. Controlled. "Maybe," he said. "We decided to hike around the lake to kill the tension." His words. Not mine. It was humid, the path narrow and quiet. At some point, he walked closer than necessary. Our arms brushed. Then stayed that way. Neither of us commented. About halfway around the trail, there was a small clearing overlooking the water. We stopped there. He leaned against a tree, looking out over the lake. I stood next to him. Close. Too close. You regret coming? He asked suddenly. No. Even if it's confusing? My stomach flipped. So it is confusing, I said. He glanced at me. There it was again. That look. Is it not for you? I hesitated. This was the moment. The line. If I stepped over it, there was no going back to normal. It is, I admitted. His jaw tightened slightly. Good, he said. Good. Not relieved. Not embarrassed. Good. My heart started pounding again. Isaac, I said carefully, what are we doing? He pushed off the tree slowly. Stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel his body heat. I don't know, he said honestly. But I know I didn't invite you here just to relax. The air between us went still. My pulse roared in my ears. You didn't? I asked. He shook his head once. No. And then he did something small but irreversible. He reached up and brushed his fingers lightly along my jaw. Testing. Just like last night. But this time, it wasn't hidden in the dark. And I didn't move away. When Isaac's fingers touched my jaw, everything else kind of disappeared. The lake, the trees, the heat, the sound of insects somewhere in the background. All I could focus on was the fact that he was standing so close I could feel his breath, and that his hand was still there. Light, careful, like he was giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. I didn't. His thumb moved slightly, brushing just under my ear. You're not stopping me, he said quietly. I don't want to. The words came out before I could overthink them. For a second, something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or tension finally releasing. Then he dropped his hand, not pulling back, just grounding himself. Okay, he said softly. And somehow that okay felt bigger than anything else that had happened so far. We didn't kiss. That's the weird part. If this were a movie, that would have been the moment. Instead, he stepped back half a step, ran a hand through his hair, and let out a slow breath. I've been thinking about this for months, he admitted. That caught me off guard. Months. He nodded, eyes on the ground for a second before looking back at me. I didn't know what it meant, he said. I still don't, honestly. But every time I thought about it, it was you. My chest tightened. You never said anything. I didn't want to mess things up. I laughed quietly. And inviting me to a one-bed cabin wasn't risky? A small smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. I figured if nothing happened, it was just a trip. And if something did, his eyes held mine. Then at least I'd know. The walk back to the cabin felt different. We weren't touching, but the distance between us had changed. Closer. More aware. At one point, our hands brushed. This time, neither of us pretended it was accidental. Our fingers slid together naturally, like they'd been doing it for years. He squeezed my hand once as we walked. Not nervous. Not hesitant. Just sure. And that almost scared me more than anything. Back at the cabin, the air felt heavier than before. We both moved around the small space like normal, grabbing water, changing shirts, opening the windows, but everything felt charged. Every glance. Every time we passed each other in the kitchen. Every time our shoulders brushed. At one point, I was standing at the sink when he came up behind me to grab something from the counter. There was plenty of room. He didn't take it. His chest brushed lightly against my back as he reached around me. He didn't move away right away. You're doing that on purpose, I said, not turning around. Yeah, he admitted. My heart jumped. You gonna tell me to stop? I turned then. He was close. Really close. Close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw. Close enough that neither of us had to move much. I don't think I want you to, I said. That was it. That was the line. This time, he didn't hesitate. His hand came up slowly, resting at the side of my neck. Warm. Steady. He watched my face for a reaction. I didn't pull away, so he leaned in. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't aggressive. It was careful, like both of us were making sure the other one was really there, really choosing this. His lips were warm, a little tense at first, then softer when I leaned into it. One of my hands came up without me thinking, gripping lightly at his shirt. He exhaled against my mouth, and the sound went straight through my chest. When we pulled back, neither of us moved far. Our foreheads almost touched. Well, he said quietly. Yeah, I breathed. That just happened. I nodded. You okay? I let out a small laugh. I've been waiting for that for like 2 years. His eyes widened. 2 years. Yeah. A slow smile spread across his face. Good, he said. Then he kissed me again. The second kiss wasn't careful. It was certain. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. My back hit the counter behind me. There was a moment where everything sped up. Heat, breath, the way his body pressed closer. Then he stopped himself. Actually stopped. He pulled back slightly, breathing heavier now. "Parker," he said quietly. There was something serious in his voice. "We should slow down." I blinked, still catching my breath. "Yeah, I don't want this to be just a weekend thing," he said. "Or something we rush and then regret." The words settled between us. And instead of disappointment, I felt something steadier. "Okay," I said. He studied my face. "You sure?" I nodded. "Yeah, I don't want to rush this either." His shoulders relaxed. "Good." Then, softer. "Because I don't think I want to go back to how things were before." Neither did I. That night, when we got into the same bed again, we didn't keep the distance anymore. And this time, when he pulled me closer, I didn't hesitate. Sleeping next to Isaac had never felt like a big deal before. We'd crashed on couches, shared blankets during road trips, passed out shoulder to shoulder more times than I could count. But that night was different. Because this time, when the lights went out and we settled under the covers, there wasn't any space between us. He turned onto his side almost immediately, facing me. I did the same. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other in the dim light coming through the window. "You're still here," he said quietly. I smiled a little. "Where else would I be?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me thought you might freak out after today." "I've wanted this for 2 years," I reminded him. He let out a slow breath, like he was still adjusting to that idea. "Yeah," he said. "I'm still wrapping my head around the fact that you didn't tell me. I didn't think you'd ever, you know." "Yeah," he said again, softer. "Me neither." There was a moment of quiet. Then his hand slid across the mattress, finding mine under the blanket. Our fingers laced together easily. No hesitation this time. Just warmth. At some point during the night, we shifted closer without really talking about it. His arm ended up around me, loose at first, like he was testing the position. When I didn't move away, he pulled me a little closer. My back settled against his chest. The contact felt solid, grounding, not rushed, not tense, just right. His breath was slow and warm against the back of my neck. "You comfortable?" he murmured. "Yeah." A small pause. "Good," he said, and his arm tightened just slightly. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning was quieter, not awkward, just softer. We moved around the kitchen without the weird tension from the day before. There was still that awareness between us, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It felt settled. At one point, I was making coffee when he walked up beside me and leaned his hip lightly against the counter, close enough that our sides touched. He didn't say anything, just stayed there. "You're clingy now?" I asked. He smirked. "Maybe. You weren't like this before." I wasn't allowed to be like this before. That hit harder than I expected. I glanced at him. "You were thinking about this for a while, huh?" He nodded once. "Yeah." Then, after a second, "I just didn't know if you'd want it too." I leaned my shoulder into his. "I did." He smiled, not the confident Isaac smile everyone else got. The real one. We spent most of the day outside again. Swimming. Sitting on the dock. Talking about nothing and everything. But now there were small things that hadn't been there before. His hand resting on my knee when we sat side by side. My shoulder leaning into his when we watched the water. At one point, when I stood up from the dock, he grabbed my hand automatically to steady me. Neither of us let go right away. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt natural, like something we'd just been waiting to allow. That afternoon, clouds started rolling in over the lake. By the time we got back to the cabin, it was already darker than it should have been. Thunder rolled in the distance. "Perfect weather," Isaac said, dropping onto the couch. "Storm weekend." Rain started a few minutes later, heavy, steady, loud against the roof. We ended up sitting close together, a blanket over both of us, some random show playing in the background. At some point, he shifted, stretching his arm along the back of the couch behind me. Then his hand settled on my shoulder. Slow, casual, like he was giving me time to react. I leaned into him instead. His arm slid around me properly then, pulling me closer against his side. We stayed like that for a while, listening to the rain. After a few minutes, he said quietly, "This feels weirdly normal." "Yeah, I thought it would feel bigger. Or scarier." I thought about that. "It kind of does feel big," I said. "Just not in a bad way." His fingers moved absently against my arm. "I don't want this to disappear when we go back," he said. The words came out low, almost like he hadn't planned to say them. I turned slightly to look at him. "Me neither." His eyes held mine. "You mean that?" Yeah. A pause. Then, more serious. Isaac, what are we doing when we get back? That question had been sitting there between us all day. He took a slow breath. I don't know exactly, he admitted. But I know I don't want to pretend this didn't happen. My chest tightened. Okay. And I don't want to go back to being just friends if we don't have to. The rain outside got louder. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I said the thing I'd been afraid to say for years. I don't want to be just friends anymore. His hand tightened slightly on my arm. Good, he said quietly. And this time, when he leaned in to kiss me, there wasn't any hesitation left. The storm didn't let up that evening. Rain kept hitting the roof in steady waves, thunder rolling every now and then, the whole cabin wrapped in that quiet, isolated feeling you only get when the weather traps you somewhere. And honestly, neither of us seemed to mind. We'd moved from the couch to the floor at some point, sitting with our backs against the bed, a blanket wrapped around both of us. The lights were low. The TV was on, but neither of us was paying attention anymore. Isaac's arm rested around my shoulders, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing small patterns on my arm. It wasn't nervous anymore. It wasn't tentative. It was comfortable, like he'd been wanting to do this for a long time. After a while, he said quietly, "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "When did it start?" I knew what he meant. "Second year," I said. "When you showed up at my apartment at 2 in the morning because you had a panic attack about failing stats." He groaned. "I did not panic." "You absolutely did." I was concerned. I smiled. "You stayed the whole night." "Fell asleep on my couch." There was a pause. "I remember," he said. "That's when I realized I was in trouble." His hand stilled slightly on my arm. "You never gave me any hint," he said. I tried not to. "Why?" I looked at him. "Because I didn't want to lose you." The honesty hung there between us. His jaw tightened a little. "You wouldn't have," he said quietly. "I didn't know that then." Another long pause. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. "I think I've been moving toward this for a while. I just didn't realize what direction I was moving in." I watched him. "What do you mean?" He leaned his head back against the bed, thinking. I never really questioned anything before. Dating girls, doing what everyone expected, it just felt like the default. His fingers started moving again, slower this time. But the last year or so, every time something big happened, every time I needed someone, it was you I wanted. My throat felt tight. And when I started thinking about the future, he continued. "You were there too. Not as a friend. Just there." He glanced at me. That confused the hell out of me. "Yeah," I said softly. "I can imagine." I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just because you're my closest friend. A small pause. But then I started noticing things. "Like what?" He gave a short breath of a laugh. "Like the fact that I'd get irritated when you talked about going on dates." I raised an eyebrow. "You never told me that." "Yeah, because that would have been a weird conversation." "Fair." "And then," he said, quieter now, "there was that night you fell asleep on my shoulder during the movie at my place." I remembered that. We'd both pretended it didn't matter. "I didn't move for 2 hours," he said. "Why?" His eyes met mine. "Because I didn't want you to wake up and move away." Something heavy and warm settled in my chest. The rain kept falling outside. Inside, the air between us felt calmer than it had all weekend. More real. More grounded. After a while, he shifted slightly, so he was facing me more directly. His hand slid from my arm to the back of my neck. Not rushed. Not intense. Just steady. "I'm still figuring this out," he said quietly. "I know. I don't have everything figured out yet. What this means. What I am. How this works. You don't have to figure it all out right now." His eyes searched mine. "You're okay with that?" "Yeah," I said. "Because this isn't new for me. I already know what I feel." That seemed to settle something in him. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead lightly against mine. "Good," he murmured. And then he kissed me again. The kiss was slower this time. Less urgency. More intention. His hand stayed at the back of my neck, holding me close but not pulling. When I shifted closer, his other arm wrapped around my waist automatically. We stayed like that for a while, just kissing, adjusting, getting used to the closeness instead of rushing past it. At some point, he pulled back slightly, resting his forehead against mine again. "I'm really glad we did this," he said quietly. "Me too." A small smile. Then, after a second, "I'm also really glad you didn't take the couch." I laughed softly. "Yeah, that would have been a terrible decision." He leaned in and kissed me again. Outside, the storm kept going. Inside, for the first time all weekend, nothing felt uncertain anymore. Not perfect, not fully defined, but real. And that was enough. Later that night, when we got into bed, he didn't hesitate. He pulled me close immediately, his arms settling around me like it belonged there. And this time, when I fell asleep against him, it didn't feel like something temporary. It felt like the beginning of something we'd been moving toward for a long time. The last morning of the trip felt different the moment I opened my eyes. Not tense, not uncertain, just real. For a few seconds, I didn't move. Isaac's arm was still wrapped around me, his chest warm against my back, his breathing slow and steady. At some point during the night, we'd shifted closer without even thinking about it. It wasn't the careful closeness from the first night. It was comfortable, natural, like we'd already gotten used to it. I started to move slightly, and his arm tightened automatically. "Don't go," he mumbled, still half asleep. I laughed quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." He made a small sound, then relaxed again, his face pressing lightly into the back of my shoulder. For a guy who usually acted calm and controlled all the time, Sleepy Isaac was surprisingly clingy. I kind of liked it. When he finally woke up properly, he didn't pull away right away. He just looked at me for a second, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning," he said. "Morning." A pause. Then he smiled, slow, real. "Still not a dream," he said. "Nope." "Good." He leaned in and kissed me lightly, like it was already part of the routine. Not intense, not dramatic, just a quiet confirmation that everything from the last 2 days was still real. Packing was weird, not awkward, just heavy in a different way. The cabin had felt like its own little world. Quiet, isolated, safe. Going back meant real life. Friends, classes, questions, expectations. At one point, I was folding a shirt when Isaac stopped moving. I glanced over. He was watching me. "You nervous?" he asked. "A little." "About what?" I shrugged. "Everything after this." He nodded slowly, like he'd been thinking the same thing. "Yeah, me too." A long pause. Then he said more firmly, "But I meant what I said. I'm not pretending this didn't happen." I believed him. That was the thing about Isaac. When he committed to something, he didn't do it halfway. "So what do we tell people?" I asked. Another pause. He leaned back against the wall, thinking. "I don't think we need to tell everyone everything right away," he said. "But I also don't want to hide you." That word hit me harder than expected. "Hide? You're okay with people knowing?" I asked carefully. He looked at me. "I'm okay with us," he said. "The rest, I'll figure out." That wasn't a perfect answer, but it was an honest one. And honestly, that meant more. The drive back was quieter than the drive there. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. At one point, about an hour in, his hand left the steering wheel and rested on the center console between us. Palm up. I looked at it, then at him. He didn't say anything, just kept driving. I slid my hand into his. His fingers closed around mine immediately. He didn't let go for the rest of the drive. When we got back to the city, reality hit faster than I expected. Traffic, noise, messages blowing up our phones. Life waiting like nothing had changed. But something had. When we pulled up outside my apartment, neither of us moved right away. "So," I said. "So," he echoed. A pause. Then, "You busy tonight?" I blinked. "We've been together for 3 days." "Yeah," he said, "and I don't want that to suddenly stop." That warm, steady feeling settled in my chest again. "I'm not busy," I said. "Good." Another pause. Then he added, quieter, "I don't think I want space from you anymore." That was it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a weekend thing. Before I got out of the car, he leaned over and kissed me. Not rushed, not hidden, right there, in broad daylight. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine for a second. "We didn't go away just to relax, did we?" he said. I smiled. "No." He exhaled, almost like he was finally letting something go. "Good." That night, when he showed up at my place like it was the most normal thing in the world, when he dropped his keys on the counter, walked over, and pulled me into a hug without hesitation, that's when it really hit me. We hadn't gone away just to relax. We'd gone away because something between us had been building for a long time. And for the first time, we'd finally stopped pretending it wasn't there. That first week back in the city felt like walking a tightrope. Not because we regretted anything, but because everything was new. Isaac started staying over at my place most nights. Not in a dramatic, we're moving in together way. Just naturally. He'd finish class, text me, "You home?" and 20 minutes later he'd be at my door. The first time he showed up and kissed me hello without hesitating, something in my chest settled. No second guessing. No, what are we? Just him choosing this. Choosing me. The first real test came that Friday. A few of our friends invited us out for drinks. The same group we'd been hanging out with for years. Normally, Isaac and I would show up together anyway. That part wasn't new. What was new was the space between us, or the lack of it. At the bar, we stood close like always. But now his hand rested at my lower back casually, like it belonged there. No big announcement. No dramatic reveal. Just small, quiet touches that meant everything. At one point, our friend Daniel looked between us. "You two good?" he asked. Isaac didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he said calmly. "We're good." The way he said it made my heart pound. Daniel nodded slowly, like he was piecing things together. "Oh," he said after a second. "Oh." I braced for something awkward. Instead, he just shrugged. "About time." Isaac blinked. "What? You idiots have been orbiting each other for years." I stared at him. "You knew?" Daniel laughed. "Everyone knew." That caught both of us off guard. "Wait," Isaac said. "You thought?" "Yeah," Daniel interrupted. "We just figured you'd eventually figure it out yourselves." And somehow, that made everything lighter. Less terrifying. Like we hadn't been as subtle as we thought. Later that night, walking back to my place, Isaac was quiet. "Everyone knew?" he muttered. I laughed. "Apparently." He shook his head, half amused, half embarrassed. "I thought I was subtle." "You're not subtle." "Shut up." But he was smiling. And when he reached for my hand as we crossed the street, he didn't hesitate. Neither did I. A week after the trip, we were sitting on my couch, same couch where he'd once fallen asleep during a panic spiral 2 years ago. Now his legs were stretched across mine, and he was scrolling through something on his phone. "You know what's funny?" he said. "What?" "If we hadn't taken that trip, I probably would have kept overthinking this for another year." "Yeah," I said. "You would have." He glanced at me. "You would have said something eventually?" I thought about that. Honestly, probably not. He frowned slightly. "Why?" "Because I was scared of losing you." He went quiet for a second. Then he set his phone down. "You were never going to lose me," he said firmly. "Yeah. Yeah." There wasn't arrogance in his voice. Just certainty. The biggest change wasn't the kisses, or the sleeping next to each other. It was the way we looked at each other now. No walls. No pretending. Just honesty. One night, as we were lying in bed, he traced lazy patterns on my arm and said quietly, "I'm still figuring out what this means about me." "I know, but I know what it means about you." I shifted slightly. "What's that?" He looked at me in that steady, grounded way he had when he was serious. "It means I don't want to build a future without you in it." That hit deeper than anything else had. Because that wasn't about labels. That wasn't about curiosity. That was about intention. "You sure?" I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Yeah." And for the first time, I believed it without fear. Looking back now, the funniest part is how we framed that trip. We're just going to relax. That's what we told ourselves. What we didn't say out loud was that something had been building for years. In the late-night talks. In the quiet jealousy neither of us admitted. In the way we always chose each other first. The cabin didn't create something new. It just forced us to stop pretending. And honestly, I don't think either of us would go back. Not to before. Not to almost. We went away just to relax. But we came back knowing exactly what we meant to each other. And this time, we weren't pretending anymore.